quilting family. I hope you're having a good day. We're off on our first free motion quilt along. Actually, this is called Stitch in the Ditch, and this is how most beginners start by quilting, is just by doing something as simple as stitch in the ditch. Now there are some little tricks I'm going to show you while we're doing this. The first off is that you install your walking foot. Now I know our camera is going to get a better picture of this later, but what your walking foot does, and install your walking foot based on your manufacturer's instructions. What your walking foot does is grab the material like that and feeds it through, you know, the machine at an even rate. That's why it's called a walking foot, because your feed dogs are here, your walking foot is here, and the material is going this way. So that's why a walking foot is really good for a stitch in the ditch, because you end up with perfectly flat little stitching. The other thing we're going to do is stitch in the ditch. Usually when you do your fabric, or you know, what some people do with their fabric, is they'll tip their both seams to one side. So that means one seam is like this and the other seam is like this, right? Well, where you want to hit that stitch in the ditch is right where your knuckles are meeting. Now if you have done both of them where you've pressed open like this is where your seams are like, there's no stitch, there's no ditch to stitch into, right? So you kind of have to, you know, okay, we're going to try to aim for the middle somewhere in there, but, you know, don't panic. This will look lovely. I have picked a pale green that's going to go with this quilt, and a pale green underneath, just in case I have tension issues. It's always a good idea to have the same color thread for on top as the bottom, because then you don't have little dots of a different color showing through if you have some tension issues. And I'm not worrying about that the pale green is going to show up on my backing fabric. I'm not worried about that at all. You can only worry about one side of the quilt, and hopefully it's the top, right? The top, not the backing. The other thing is I'm going to show you a cheat. I know. Because this quilt is being evenly quilted throughout by doing stitch in the ditch, that means it's a jelly roll race, so the lines are only going to go this way. I can cheat by doing a stitch along the very outside edge. It's called stay stitching. That's the sewing term for it. And we're going to do that first so things don't shuffle and move. And you can do this with a lot of your quilts, and then your quilt edges don't ripple. And this is the very best way of doing it, is do it before you start quilting. And then if you quilt the same all throughout the quilt, you have perfectly flat edges. So anyways, this is going to be a charity quilt, and I thought about it last night, and I thought, I'm not going to over quilt it. I want this to be soft and cuddly for someone that's going through a really difficult time. So we're only going to be showing you how to stitch in the ditch. So you should come on a little closer and we'll get started. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine. This is my walking foot. It's been installed correctly. Now, what I'm going to show you how to do is to bring up your thread. Right? When you bring up your thread, like you bring up your bobbin, this is your top thread and this is your bobbin thread. You need these both up, but you need them up once you're in your first stitch, right? Now what I do is I just move my, I hold on to my top thread, right? And I just go right to the edge, and all I'm doing is following the edge of my walking foot along this edge here, this cut edge here, right? So I'm going to just drop down my needle, and I'm hand cranking this machine, and then I'm just going to pull on it just very gently, and what happens is that bobbin thread comes up like magic. And now you're just going to pull through that bobbin and then put it in position where it's out of your way for your stitching. So both threads now are on top, both the bobbin and the top thread are here. You move it out of the way to start your stitching. Now I've reduced my stitch length by quite a bit. So on my machine I can set it by, I want like 12 stitches an inch, or I want, you know, 10 or 8 or whatever. You need a larger stitch to do your stay stitching and your stitch in the ditch. So here we go. Like I say, we're just following the side of the foot, which is about 1/4 inch, It's probably a little fat, but that's okay. A little chubby. And you don't even have to back stitch this. And we're going to go along here real quick. Now, you're probably wondering what I'm going to do with these stitches, right? Now, I didn't back stitch on this at all, but I can also work my stitches in and just tuck them under the fabric. I can just tuck this right under the fabric right now, and I'll encase that long bit of thread inside the quilt batting, right? So I can also show you a trick on how to do them if you've got lots of little loops and stuff that you've got ends that you got to work in. I'm not a big fan of those self-threading needles. I find they break too often, but that's my opinion, and I guess if you find a different opinion on that, that's great. Now, so I'm just going to go along through all 4 sides of this quilt. Just doing a stay stitch, it's like only like a 1/4 inch. It's a chubby quarter, but it's a 1/4 inch, because this will make sure that the outside doesn't get wavy. So we'll come back when I'm done going around all the quilt. So now that I've gone all the way around the quilt, all 4 sides with this stay stitching, I'm now back at my starting corner. Now, stay stitching is really easy to take out. If you did find out that you had puckers or bubbles and it wasn't quite as smooth as you thought it was going to be, it's fine. It's easy to take out. All you're doing is stabilizing the edge. So you're not quilting something with, you know, the top flipped up wrong or whatever. So I'm going to show you what my grandmother did instead of buying those self-threading needles. Now, what she would do is she would get right to the edge, and we're going to work this next piece of thread in. So let me get right to the edge. So I'm going to cut off my top and bottom. Like, I could bring my bottom up if I wanted to, but I'm just going to show you this. This is so quick. So you take the one thread, and now on this, I'm hoping you can see this. You've got a needle, a regular needle, and about 8 inches of thread with thread conditioner on it, or beeswax, or whatever you decide to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top thread and put it through my loop. I'm going to lasso that thing, and then I'm going to shove this needle in, and I'm going to take it quite a ways in, and I'm just going to pull that thread through just like that. So this little thing you keep using over and over and over again, and here's my top thread. Now I'm going to do the same to the back thread, right? Just so you see this, because this is they're really cute. Long armers and home sewers can use this for burying their threads. You grab your thread, your 8 inches of thread on your needle, and you grab that loose thread that you want to bury right in that loop. Then you take your needle and you decide where you're going to bury it into. You're going to try and bury it close to the hole as you can, and then you're going to slide this through, not going through the front but through the batting and the backing, and you're going to go in as far as you can, or as far as you want to. And then you're just going to pull that lasso, grabs that little thread, and it's gone. Just like that. Very quick, very simple. And, you know, like, you can use that same thread over and over and over again, possibly for your entire quilt. So it's a really cute little fast trick. Long armers can use it, you know, anybody. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start the stitching in the ditch, because we've got the quilt prepared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start somewhere in the middle, and I'm just going to slide my quilt under my foot the best I can. And you can start dead center and work your way out, but the best way to do this is start in the middle. So this is kind of the middle. It might not be exactly the middle, but you get the idea. So you're in the middle of the quilt. Well, you want to pull this down to that one edge there. Here at this edge, right, to start. And where you want to start is just to drop your needle and pull your thread up. Yes, I know it. You can just, you know, leave your thread, but it could make a bird's nest behind and make a mess. And it's good practice for you to get into the habit of oh, my thread's gonna lose my thread. Just a sec here. There we go. It's good practice for you to get into the habit of pulling up your thread as you're quilting. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna start just like a stitch or two back from that line. So now you're gonna drop your oh, it's just a little bit back further. You're gonna drop your needle down, pull up your thread. Oh, and that's cut too short too. Oh, and grab it with your tweezers. I cut my threads too short, that's why I'm having problems. Okay, so now you're going to push this back because you've got both the top and the bottom, and you're going to hold it out of the way. Now you can go up and down in place, you know, like 1 or 2 stitches back and forth, and then go. Because then this thread you don't have to bury, you can just clip it really tight because the ends of it are going to be in the binding, right? So now we're just going to try and follow along that ditch as best we can. And if we wobble a little bit, it's okay. Nobody's going to notice this. There's so much going on this quilt top. Nobody's going to notice if you wobble. The thread matches pretty much any part of this quilt. It'll be fine. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go stitch, and basically now our hands are using to steer. Now you don't want to find yourself out like this. That would be bad because you have no control. So you just do one handful at a time, because this is where you're going to find the control. So you just keep going through there, and I always like to stop with my needle down. And on my machine I don't have a button that I can push to say needle down or needle up, so I just hand crank it towards the needle towards me. So there we go. And one of the funny things, I thought this would be perfect to show you how to do stitch in the ditch. Now you see I'm a little wobbly here, a little wobbly there, but I'm kind of in the ditch. Nobody's going to see this once it's washed and cuddled with, so it's fine. And by the way, I do pull threads as I see them, so. Okay. And that's just one more push through, and you are setting your stitches a little bigger, and you're going to hold up the weight with your lap and your arms. I always have a table in front of me. I like having a table in front of me because that way I'm pushing the weight of the quilt onto a table. Okay. There we go. And you can hardly see the thread color on this. So all this is going to do is hold the quilt together. And that's the beauty about stitch in the ditch. It can be, if your colors of fabric and everything, your pattern that you've quilted, is what you want to speak to, you know, the person that's looking at it, if that's the only thing you want to speak, it's a perfect way of doing this. Because there's no fighting between, you know, the fabric and the pattern and the quilting that you're doing. So let me get this done, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, we're now coming up to the last pin, and everything else is quilted except this little area here. And I want to explain something to you about this. So let's just get this done real quick like. And we're going to back up in the area where the binding is going to be, the seam allowance where the binding is going to be. Now, I'm going to show you, hopefully the camera's going to be able to pick this up. When I take out this pin, sometimes there's going to be little holes left because this is a big safety pin here, right? So I'm going to just see if I can't. I'm hoping you can see that, where I took the pin out. There's 2 little divots where this mark has been. Well, what you do is you just scratch them with your fingernail and move the fabric back into place. and that's it. And now when you wash it, you're going to wash this before you give it to the charity, and they'll never know if it was a pin or not, if there was a pin there or not. So that's a really good tip. Now we're going to check the quilt now for puckers, and rouging is what the correct term is, and we're going to show you what we've done. Okay, so we're done sewing, and we've brushed out all the little pin marks on here. So we're just going to take a quick look. See, it doesn't look like there's any ruching or puckers on the front. It's a really soft hand, so it's going to be very cuddly and wonderful when, you know, it's used by a child. And this is the back. This is the back, and when I'm looking here, I don't see any puckering, I don't see any ruching, and you'll see it come up. Like, there's a little bit of here, right here, and that's more of a stubborn wrinkle that will come out during wash, right? But that's fabric, that's not a pucker, because a pucker you could feel there's a bump. But yeah, this turned out just beautifully. Anyways, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it and put a binding on it. But next week, come back and we'll show you a different method on how to do the quilting. Like, this is the simplest method, and and basically you're following the design lines or re-sewing the lines of the quilt you've already made. And it's this very simple, clean, quick finish. So the next one will be a little bit different, and I'm going to save that for a surprise. Okay, you have a great day and a wonderful week ahead. Bye! If you have questions about what you saw in this video, or you have ideas for content or something you want to see us do, please put those comments in the description below. But also, while you're there, like, share, and subscribe with your friends. That would really help us out. Okay, I want to thank you and have a great day.